Good morning, Centerville Elementary. It is Saturday, November the 7th, 2020, and I am in the Rocky Tidal pools at Town Neck Beach in Sandwich, right at the eastern end of the Cape Cod Canal. I came over to these rather than the ones that are right at the mouth of the canal because people don't usually come all the way down here, and I might have a better chance of finding things. Let's look at some seaweed first. So I'm going to try to move the camera really slowly so that anyone who gets motion sick like me is going to be okay with this. See how this algae is just floating and moving back and forth as the water comes in and out. These guys have floaties, just like you might have had when Mom or Dad were teaching you to swim. These little floaties help them lift up. And the reason they need to lift up is they make food, sugar foods, using sun energy to power their sugar food factory in their chloroplasts through a process called photosynthesis. So this is a brown algae. This is called Fucus vesiculosus, or rockweed, and it has a midrib. You can see a line right down the middle of their fronds. They don't really have leaves. The whole plant is like a leaf, and they're called fronds. Seaweeds do not have roots like plants up in the soils. They have, let me get over to it, they have an object called a holdfast that holds fast to the rock so that they can stay attached. What a lot of boys and girls do when they get in the tidal pools is they pop the seaweed floaties. We don't want to do that because if this plant can't lift up, it can't make its food. If it can't make its food, it's going to die. This is the one with the midrib, the rockweed with the midrib, the fucus. And then over here is the other kind of rockweed. So that's why we have to have a science name, because there's two kinds of rockweed here. And this one is Ascophyllum. Ascophyllum. And both of these brown algae, brown seaweeds, have floaties. Can you see the floaties there? Because these plants get whipped back and forth in the water when the waves come in and out, they don't grow from the tip like other plants would, because the tips just get broken. Can you see? The tips are kind of ragged looking. So they grow from the middle of the plant. There are encrusting seaweeds as well. See the orange on this rock? So there's lots of different seaweeds. There's upright seaweeds, seaweeds with floaties, and then there's seaweeds that just grow right on the rock. And guess who's eating the seaweed? Can you see the snails, the periwinkle snails? They have a tongue that's called a radula. It's like a piece of sandpaper. And what they're doing is they're moving over the rock, scraping, scraping, scraping. And I wonder, see here where it's a little lighter color? I wonder if that's where they might have eaten already and scraped up the algae. I'm not sure. But periwinkles are mollusks, and we're going to talk about mollusks next. I have a tray of mollusks here that I've collected for us to look at. And so I have the univalves on one side and the bivalves on the other. Uni means one, just one shell. And can you see the guy that's not happy when he's upside down? That's a dog whelk. You can see his tentacles coming out. And he is like, what is going on? I need to flip over. I think he might have noticed me. They do have eyes. There's another one that's managing to right himself. They can tell if they're upside down or not. Dog whelks are really amazing. But they are not the cows of the sea. Dog whelks actually eat other organisms. Like the periwinkles, the snails that we looked at first, have a tongue that's like sandpaper. These guys do too, but what they do with that sandpaper tongue is they actually get inside the shells that are covering other organisms and they eat them. So because this guy is white, and it's kind of, oh look at, see, you have your food growing on your shell. They eat barnacles, and there's some little barnacle spat, tiny little barnacles that have actually started growing on the dogwog shell. Oh, that's only fair. You eat their mom and dad, and they sort of sit on you and grow. The barnacle is not doing anything to the shell. It just has a place to grow. Let's look back at the periwinkles because I found some really interesting periwinkles. I call these guys the commandos. Don't they look like someone in the army or the Marines when they're trying to get through and sneak up on somebody? They have plants on their helmets. Well, these guys have algae growing on their shell. And this algae is a beautiful algae called corallina or coralline algae. And it's almost like coral. It has this hard body covering that it gets from seawater. And it makes this shell. And when they're alive, did I have a piece that was still alive? Yes. When they're alive, they're this pretty pinky color with little white tips. And this guy actually has some pink encrusting algae growing on him as well. Move the camera up, Mrs. B. There. So we have seaweed. One of my favorite mollusks, the univalves, is actually the little slipper shell. So here it is. Over here, they are stacked up on rocks. Over into it in the warmer waters of Vineyard Sound, you can find huge piles of these. In the rocky tidal pools, life is a little bit harder for them than the sand tidal pools, the mud flats. And so I don't usually find huge stacks. Sometimes I do. The bottom one is an individual that is always a female. And then the ones that are stacked up on top are usually males. If the female dies, the next one up, the male that's right up above her, can turn into a female, but he can't go back to a male. So I think that's kind of cool if you're all stuck together like that through suction, that if one dies, another one has a chance to become a female, because we know that females are the ones that have the babies. So let's look over here. See them all stacked up on the rock? Little boat shell or slipper shell are names that they have, and I wanted us to see inside, because inside their shells are actually kind of gorgeous. You can see where they get their name. Can you imagine someone slipping their foot in the air and wearing that as a slipper? I wonder if fairies come in here and do that. Some people say, no, it's not a slipper, it's a boat, and that's the deck of the boat. Do you see how there's just one shell and the body would be in there, and then they're stuck on one another? Bivalves, like these blue mussels, they don't have just one shell, do they? They have 2 shells. Bi means 2. These guys are filter feeders. And so what they do is when they're in the water, like this big guy over here, or the smaller ones that are here, is they open up their shell just ever so little bit, and they stick out 2 siphons. They're almost like garden hoses, but they're short. One of them is an in-current siphon, and the other one is an ex-current siphon. So in-current siphons go, and ex-current siphons go. So you got, and they take in seawater. Anything that's food, can be little bits of plants and animals, goes to their digestive system. Anything that's like grains of sand gets spit back out. And so this guy doesn't want to get battered up when the tide comes in, and so it uses these spissel threads so that it's able to be heavy and not get all broken up. Sometimes those spissel threads attach to a periwinkle, or they attach to a crab, and those animals are caught and they'll die. Now, did the mussel select them? No, the mussel doesn't have eyes. It doesn't know who's getting stuck in its spissel threads. It just knows it wants to add weight to it. So mussels are amazing. There's different kinds, and we do eat these guys. Blue mussels. You can get them in a restaurant. Do you remember what color they are inside? They're orange. What else do I have here? Oh, I have another bivalve. This is another organism that we eat. We don't see too many here because we don't really have a sandy beach. Over on the south side of Cape Cod, you can find these. Do you know what this is? It's a little scallop. Scallops are yummy. We eat the muscle of the scallop that it uses to keep its shell closed. I only found one. This is a bivalve, so how many shells does it have? 2. And let's see, did I have anything else in here? Oh, the little crabby. Oh, no, I wanted to show you this too. Another bivalve that we eat. I couldn't find one that was all together. Our soft shell clams. We eat cohogs, little necks. Let's see what else. Scallops I talked about, right? So shellfish are part of our food. Oh, look. You can see little tiny little boat shells in there. Look at them. They're just starting their life. Tiny little dots. That's why we don't take empty shells unless we check them over and make sure nobody is using that for a home. Let's look at some crustaceans here. Because it is November, it's really hard to find a variety of crabs here because most species go into the deeper water, like the green crab. This is just a piece of the carapace of a green crab. Green crabs have 5 teeth or points that go to their eye on either side, and they have, it almost looks like they're wearing a necklace, a little strand of pearls or dots. And that makes this a green crab. It can be orange, it can be brown, it can be green, it can even have blue claws. And this is a female Asian shore crab. Her abdomen is like a perfect half of a circle. The tide is coming in and my containers are floating. And so when she's pregnant, late spring through the summer, she can have several litters, I guess we could call it, several groups of eggs a year. It's like one big egg mass with hundreds of little dots in it. It's kind of purpley, dark colored. And the larvae hatch in the water. And then they eventually get to have a shell when they're older. I don't know what time they develop their shell. It could be weeks or a month or so. And so you can see the difference. Remember, the males have the Washington Monument and the females have the half a circle. And these again are Asian shore crabs. Other guys in the bucket. Hello, one claw. Let me pick you up and see. Oops, oh. Get back over here. Stop it. I know, giant picking you up is not very friendly. Okay, so he's lost a claw. Next time he sheds, he'll get it back. But there's not going to be too much shedding because winter's coming. Can you see that thin strip? I'm looking at the underside of his shell. It almost looks like the Washington Monument. That tells me this is a male, and it's a male Asian shore crab. He has these great stripings on him and kind of a squarish shell. Asian shore crabs come from Asia, so they're the latest wash ashores here. I'm gonna put him down on this rock, and we'll see him take off and hide under the rock. You see the barnacles are open? That's what the dog whelks do to the barnacles. They pry open their door and they eat them. Remember, barnacles are crustaceans, and dog whelks eat the barnacles. They also eat the mussels, and when they're mussel eaters, that's when they're that kind of brownish orange that we see. So this is all salty water, and it's actually baking in the sun, so organisms that live here have to be able to take drastic changes in temperature. So one moment it's super hot, and then when the tide comes in, the water temperature